have a vision. We have a vision for this nation. We share a dream for this land. The jubilee and celebration. Of faith we speak the Bible to this land. Every knee shall bow, worship you. So confess that you are Lord. If I said open heaven, let our praises stand. Move your sovereign hand across this nation. All right, if I could get Jeremy to open us up in prayer. We got, Children's Church in the back from, 5 to 10. And we're going to continue our Bible study, Uprooting, Rejection.
Good morning. Good to see you all here. Hey, Jared, do you want to put these coolers at the because it'll get warm in here. So we just put them at the temperature we normally. All right, we're going to be continuing with our Sunday school that we started a few weeks ago, Uprooting Rejection. And so we had last week off, so let's just review real quick. Who remembers what our Sunday school is going to be about? Okay, and does anybody remember what last week's lesson was on? Or 2 weeks ago, our first lesson? Michelle? Roots of rejection. Okay, so roots of rejection was our first lesson, and we kind of laid some important foundations there. Does anybody remember what we talked about in roots of rejection? Vicki? Healing and healthy roots. Yeah, that was the end of it. Yeah, that's true. We talked about how God wants to bring deliverance and healing from the past. Yeah. What else did we talk about? So it's like kind of the primary truth of all of this and understanding the idea of uprooting. Sylvia? Yeah. No, very good. Yeah. So this is why the whole idea of the Sunday school is roots and uprooting, is because in life there is what people do, but the bigger question is why. And there are surface issues, and then there are issues under the surface. And that's actually what we really have to pay attention to, is the things under the surface. And so we pointed out that rejection, it is a root issue. It's not a surface issue. There are things people do on the surface, but under the surface, rejection is driving a lot of people's decisions, and those would obviously be unhealthy or destructive, negative choices that they're making, because under the surface is an issue of rejection. So this morning is going to be our second lesson, and it's going to be rejection and the home. And we're going to actually, because it's an important matter. So we're going to be looking at this week and next week, rejection and home. So what we're going to be talking about how a lot of these roots of rejection, they begin in the home. And we're going to kind of examine that this morning, and then we're going to move on next week and deal with some additional truths about that. So why don't we get some scriptures this morning? If you want to read, lift your hand. We'll give you a scripture. Aileen, you're going to get Psalm 27, verse 10. Adrian, you're going to get John chapter, or 1 John chapter 4, verse 18. So that's the one, it's John with the 1 in front of it. 1 John 4:18. Michelle, John chapter 8, verse 44. And Jeremy, Luke chapter 15, verse 29 and 30. And that'll be all for this morning. Not too many scriptures. Okay, so rejection. We're talking about rejection, the disapproval or lack of valuing. It's a root in many people's lives, leads to unhealthy, destructive emotions, reactions, mindsets, and choices. And we are examining this biblically to find the hope of supernatural deliverance and the power of truth to bring free. Will is not for you to live your life under the curse of rejection and for this to be how you process all of life. And so this morning we're going to be looking at the most common place that rejection occurs, which is in the home, or sometimes it's a lack of having a home. And we are going to look at how God can heal us there. But in order to do that, we've got to dig into how this occurs. So Psalm 27, verse 10 is going to be our main text, and this points out how this can happen. So let's go there, Psalm 27, verse 10. Okay, so the first thought is rejection in the home. Rejection in the home. Is there a slide for that, Sarah? Will you go to the next one and see? Okay, so there you go. Rejection in the home. So let's kind of work through this. God has designed family to be the foundation of human relationships and personality. The family is a very important thing. Our society has totally misunderstood and seems to be completely ignorant to how important the family is. The family is the foundation. And so the family, or what we would call our home life, it's meant to be a place of acceptance, a place of acceptance. This is like the opposite of rejection, right? Rejection is a lack of acceptance. The family or the home is meant to be a place of acceptance, right? You think about little children, they naturally run to their parents or cling to them, right? You ever see a little kid that's scared? What do? They hold mom or dad, right? Really tight. Or if something goes wrong, they run to mom or dad. That simple action points out to us God's design. That's what the home is meant to be. It's meant to be a place of acceptance. It should be where we're accepted. And this is actually the primary place that we are supposed to experience acceptance. Now, in a perfect world, this is what the family should be. And let's talk about, in a perfect world, what it should be like. In a home, you would have both father and mother, man and woman, right? Again, today we have all sorts of confusion about that. But God's design, in a perfect world, there would be a father and a mother in the home raising the children. And both father and mother would want the child. They would want this. This would be something that they were excited about, accepting, rejoicing in that they were going to have a child. They would also raise the children. This means they would be there physically. There would be the presence of father and mother in the home. There would be provision. They're going to provide what the child needs. And there would be instruction. They would teach the children the way that life is. They would teach them about life. They would teach them how to handle people and situations and finances and how to make it through hard things and all sorts of different areas in which they need instruction. They would also love the children. They would express this with words and affection. They would tell the children how much they loved them and valued them and accepted them. They would take actions that communicate that love to those children. And they would ultimately accept the child. And what that means is the parents' love is not based on performance, right? I love you no matter what. I love you even when you're not doing well, even when you're doing wrong. I love you. I don't approve of what you're doing, but I love you. It's not based on performance. So this is in a perfect world what acceptance in the home should look like. Now, when this is present in healthy families or relationships, it provides very powerful things inside of a person. First, it provides identity. This is where people figure out who they are. This is one of the keys to understanding people. Identity is actually primarily formed in the home. They learn who they are in those early experiences that they have in their home with their parents. They are figuring out, how do I think of myself? Who am I? Well, in a perfect world, in an accepting home, they figure out, oh, this is who I am. I'm somebody that's loved and accepted. I'm valued. And they understand this about themselves. It also brings confidence, right? They have confidence because value has been communicated to them. They're not scared. They're not insecure all the time. They're not full of fear. They have confidence because they've already been given the message, you are valuable. You are worth something. And so they see themselves this way, as valuable and worth something, and I have something to offer. Therefore, they carry themselves with a sense of confidence. And then it's reference points, right? Reference points are, what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to act? What am I supposed to be? They would learn that in the home, right? How does a man act? Well, they would learn that from their father. They would see a loving, godly, accepting father who stood for the right thing. That's what a man is. They would learn how to be a woman from their mom. They would learn how to treat other people from the relationships they see in the home. Well, how do you talk to somebody? What are the things you say? What don't you say? How do you interact with people? What is appropriate in relationship? All of their reference points would be found in this a godly design for the home. And then, of course, boundaries, right? They learn boundaries. How much is too far? What is unacceptable? In other words, in a perfect home, there is a place for discipline, right? Some people have the wrong idea of discipline. They think discipline is abuse. No, that's, if you have that reference point, well, that's an incorrect reference point, is abuse. Discipline is not abuse. And you have to be careful not to think all discipline is wrong if you had the wrong reference points of discipline. In a godly home, a perfect home, let's say, there would be boundaries, right? Here is what you can do. Here is what you can't do. And then, of course, they would learn those boundaries. They'd step over the line and there would be consequences. So they would learn, oh, you can't just do anything. There are boundaries in life. There's a way that you are allowed to act and there's a way you are not allowed to act. There are things you are allowed to do and there are things you are not allowed to do. And they would learn that in the context of the home. Now, unfortunately, this is not what happens in many people's lives. It's not a perfect home situation that we just described with the results that we just described. In fact, for many people, the home can be the place of the first rejections. And this actually, when this occurs, these are the greatest rejections in life. The home ends up being a place that opens the door to a curse of rejection in their life that stays with them for a long time. Sarah, if you would go to the next scripture, maybe Aileen, since this was your scripture, this is a different translation. Go ahead and read that off the screen. Okay, so here's the Bible speaking to people that unfortunately are living with the realities of a sinful world and a sinful humanity. The home is meant to be a place of love and acceptance, but the problem is that sometimes that's not the case. It talks about the possibility of abandonment. The Bible tells actually many stories of family rejection, and the reason is because it is unfortunately common. So let's look at some of the ways that rejection comes in the home. First, it can be through the circumstances of birth. And specifically, it's when the birth is not being wanted. Okay? So I want you to understand the connection here. Life is very spiritual, people are spiritual. And so there are times when a child is not wanted from the beginning, from the time of even pregnancy, right? There are unwanted pregnancies. Maybe somebody gets pregnant at a young age. Maybe it's the result of an affair, adultery, incest, rape. Maybe it's the financial situation, right? The parents are not in a good financial place, and they say, we don't want a child right now. We don't want to deal with that. Or maybe there's life plans that a child would interfere with my goals and my plans. Sometimes in certain cases, a child is given up for adoption, right, in this scenario. And so when there's an unwanted pregnancy, because people are spiritual, and this is actually, science only catches up with God over time. They've now found this out, is from being in the womb, people feel this. And this is a strange phenomenon, and it's proved out scientifically that this affects a child even from this point in the womb when there is unwanted pregnancy. It can be disappointment sometimes over a child's gender, right? There's moms, right? I didn't want a boy. Sometimes it's right. They hate men. I don't want a boy. Or there's entire cultures where boys are valuable and girls are not. And so they're disappointed when they find out I'm having a girl. And so from this young age, something is imparted to this little life that has just begun. So it's birth circumstances. It's also inherited rejection. Here's one of the things that is a very important truth about life. You always impart what you are. Whatever you have inside of you, you're going to pass it on. And so what happens in the home, parents who have rejection issues, what happens? They give rejection issues to their kids. Those who have been rejected are so often the ones who end up rejecting others. And so this is spiritually true. There's a spiritual curse. This is literally true. Now, in line with that, here I'll give you an important key to getting free. As we're talking about uprooting rejection, I would just suggest that one of the things you're going to need to learn to do is to have mercy on your parents, right? Because a lot of us, if you've been through hard things with your parents, did you know that sometimes they didn't know any better? A lot of times this was all they knew. This was their entire reference points. And so having mercy on someone doesn't mean you're saying what they did was okay, but it means having an understanding attitude towards somebody, even if they did things that weren't right. Well, you know what? They didn't know any better. They had all their reference points were the wrong things maybe. And so that can go a long way in helping you to get free from rejection is, not living the rest of your life blaming and just focusing all your issues on, because, again, this is our generation, isn't it? So many people around our, like say my age, a little older, a little younger, their whole mantra of life is, I am the way I am because of what other people did, and they live the rest of their life going, you messed up my life, pointing the finger at their parents, and their parents are most often the ones they point the finger at. Now, although that there may be some truth in that, you'll never get free if all you can do is point the finger. And this is the way that you process all of life. So inherited rejection is one of the ways that rejection comes into the home. The third way that rejection comes into the home is abandonment. Abandonment is when a parent leaves the children. Right? Like I said, in a perfect world, parents are there. Father, mother, here's the home. So there's people, they won't raise the child after pregnancy, right? One of the great problems of our society. Men who don't mind making babies, but they don't want to stick around to raise the children. They don't want to live with that responsibility. Or it's parents who run away. Every time things get hard, right? It's stressful. They run away. They do this sometimes through affairs, right? Adultery, through in selfishness. They run away from the problems and difficulties of the home. This is actually what divorce is, right? Divorce is the ultimate abandonment for a child because it communicates, right? I can't take it, so I'm out of here. I don't want to deal with this. I don't need to deal with this. And so then there's this destruction in the home. There's a well-known rapper. He was interviewed, and he talks about his father, and he says, my drug addict father would say he was going to pick me up, spend time with me, but he didn't. And the reason was he was addicted to drugs. And so think about this, right? From the dad's, I'm sure if you asked the dad, he would probably have reasons why he did drugs and why he wasn't there for his son. And he wouldn't have seen it probably as, I don't love my son. But listen, here's how this man took it. He says, my dad chose drugs over me. He loved drugs more than he loved me. Right? So he's waiting on the weekend. Dad's coming to pick me up. No, dad's not here. Why? In his little mind, dad loves drugs more than me. So here he's getting rejected over abandonment. Dad's being selfish. He wants to make himself feel good. The child is being rejected. Then there's the issue of addictions. Addictions in the home, alcohol, drugs, pornography, right? All these things, the problem with them is they consume the love and acceptance that is meant to be in the home. It creates a failure to love or meet needs, right? It's so often you hear these stories, right? Mom, she wasn't there to tuck us into bed because she's passed out on the couch, right? Dad didn't bring home money to pay the rent because he's wasting all his money on other things. He's disconnected. He's addicted to other things. It brings instability, right? Now the child home is not a place of security and stability. It's always unstable because, how many know that's what happens when people are addicted to things? There's instability in their life. And of course, there's the message that the thing they're addicted to has more value, right? That is more valuable than the kids. Then there's the issue of abuse. Abuse brings rejection. Whether it's violence, I was listening to my father's testimony recently, and he's talking about this growing up, watching abuse happen in the home, watching, dad beat up stepmom, and they're watching this as little kids. They're throwing down in the living room, right? The kids are right there. They're watching blood flying over the living room. I'll never forget one of the memories I have as a child that I'll never forget is we actually moved in to the home that my dad lived in when he was a kid. And by this point, my parents are saved. They're in the ministry. And I remember my dad, he brought me and my sister, and he walked over to the wall. He pulled out the couch, and he said, you see here where all the drywall is repaired? Yeah. He said, that's where I watched my dad grab my stepmother from the back of her hair and shove her face first through the wall because he was in a fit of drunken rage. Right? And so here's my dad, a little boy, he's watching all of this. What is it communicating? It's communicating rejection. Maybe it's violence, maybe it's verbal abuse, maybe it's sexual abuse, right? All these things, what happens is they attack your worth. As a child, it attacks your worth, and it gives it can either demean or it gives you a false or twisted message of your worth. Right? This happens a lot of times when it comes to sexual issues. It sends the message, you are only worth something for sex. Right? You ever seen a little girl that she is acting and dressing way too old? What's happening? Well, somebody has sent her the message, you are only good for one thing. You are worth something if you get sexual attention from men. And so then, a teenage girl who should have no idea about these things, she starts acting, talking, dressing a certain way to get the worth that she desperately craves, but she's been taught through abuse that it only comes one way. This is how you're worth something. It can also come through harsh words. Words spoken in the home are very powerful. Harsh words. What good are you? You're stupid. You're worthless. I hate you. I never wanted you. I wish you were never born. It's amazing to me as a pastor when I'm counseling people. I can be counseling adults. They can remember 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Words that were spoken to them when they were a child, and they live with this because they've defined their life this way. Mom said, Dad said that, and then they'll quote it word for word, and it's how they've thought of themselves, and it's been there, right? Sometimes it's abuse like this that's deliberate. Somebody that's deliberately saying these things to hurt you, but a lot of times it's not deliberate. It's harsh words that are an overflow of what's going on in their lives. Dad had a bad day at work. Mom and dad are fighting, and then these words are spoken. But the problem is a child who's not old enough to understand what's behind that, they take it and they hold on to it, and it's meaningful to them, right? Mom or dad would say, oh, no, I was just mad. Oh, I was just having a bad day. But the child doesn't understand any of that. They hold on to it, and it becomes a defining issue. Another issue is withholding love. Right? There are parents that never learn to be affectionate with their children. Their attitude is like, well, yeah, of course I love them because I'm still here, right? I'm paying the bills, keeping the lights on. Obviously, that means I love you. But they never express it, right? They withhold affection. They don't hold and hug and express through words. They don't show somebody that affection. They don't show that towards the child. Gifts or anything like that. It's cold. It's indifferent is the way it comes across, and that communicates rejection in the home. Then there's the inability to express love. No words of love, value, or acceptance. There are people, they are so uncomfortable expressing affection. It's like they can't say it. There's coldness. There's inattention. The parent is there, but never speaks or interacts with the child. I've heard people say, I'm sure my father or mother loved me. They just never said it. They never showed it. Then there's the issue of being demanding or hard to please. I remember my mom telling me, she was lucky to have both parents at home. But one of the things that she had to deal with was a father who was very difficult to please. And he was an artist. And I remember my mom telling me, she was very interested in art as a young age, especially because this was her dad's profession. But she said every time she would do anything, draw, paint, whatever, and she would show dad, right? What is she looking for? She's looking for dad to say, that's amazing. I love it. You did awesome. Instead, what would he do? He would point out everything wrong with it. No, you did that wrong. You did that wrong. Da, da, da. And basically she said at some point, this was like too much for her to handle. So she just quit. I'm going to do something else with my life. I'm not going to be an artist like dad because he's too hard to please. And so that happens sometimes is if you live in a home that is performance-based, right? I will love or accept you if you do right or if you succeed. This can be worldly success, right? Parents, everything is about success. In sports, in school, right? If you get good grades, if you go to a good college, if you're successful financially, they put this on their children. Or, one of the other dangers is we can even do this spiritually as Christians, right? We have to be careful not to communicate to our children, I love you only if you serve God, only if you do right, because that also is not a good message. Yes, there are consequences for sin, but you never want to communicate to your children, I don't love you when you do wrong. This is why one of the things, when I discipline my kids, I will discipline them for what they've done wrong, but many times right afterwards, I hold them, I hug them, I tell them, I still love you. The way I feel towards you doesn't change if you've done something wrong. I still love you. I'm trying to help you by setting boundaries for you, and there's consequences because they have to learn that. If you don't discipline your kids, the problem is they will never learn boundaries. They do whatever they want, and then you don't discipline them. That also communicates rejection, because what it communicates is I don't care what you do. And then the problem is they get older and they don't have any sense of boundaries, right? And then they do something, and then the cops are the ones dealing with them, not mom or dad. So you have to communicate those boundaries. There's discipline in a careful and loving way, but then I always be sure to tell them, like, it doesn't change how I feel about you. I am not telling you I don't love you. I'm not telling you I don't accept you. I will love you no matter what you're doing, but I still love you. The problem is sometimes people haven't received that message, right? Because here's one of the wonderful as your children are right now, how many know there will probably come a day when they don't succeed or they may not do right? You know, it is a blessing to raise your kids in church. That activates so many of the promises of God. But here's a reality. You know, you can raise your kids in church, you can do it all right, and they can still choose one day to do wrong. It's their choice one day. They're going to be able to decide. And so that's it becomes a serious stain on their identity and the way they think of themselves if the message that's been communicated to them is, I don't love you if you're doing wrong. They become buried under shame. There's no way of getting out for them. They can't see it, right? There's some children, they can never do enough to please their parents. Story in a book, a young man, he was involved in track. He came in second place in the state track meet. Seems pretty good, right? Second in the whole state. He walked off the racetrack, and his dad was standing there, and his dad told him, how does it feel to be the first loser? Right? It's never good enough. Oh, yeah, you're second in the whole state. It means nothing. It's not good enough. I remember I was talking to Pastor Jamie about it just recently. I remember a number of years ago, we went to a basketball game here at the high school, and the star player for the high school, I remember I'm sitting there in the seat, and I see this guy who's like pacing around the whole auditorium, you know, and he's like he's a grown man, he's like throwing a fit, you know, he's cussing, blah, blah, blah. And then, you know, there's thousands of people, and he starts yelling at his son, right? His son is the star, best player on the team, but dad is having a meltdown because his son's not doing good. Totally shaming his son in front of thousands of people, right? The whole city, pretty much, in Espanola. Everybody know. And I remember Jamie telling me, he goes, yeah, I know his dad. I used to play basketball. He's like, and he goes, it makes me so mad to watch him do that to his kid. You know, here's his son, best player, not good enough. Not good enough. You're making me look bad. As though, you know, the dad's identity is somehow on the line because his son isn't living up to some standard that he set for him. And then there's the issue of favoritism, right? Favoritism in the home is very destructive. Very destructive. When there's a parent who blatantly prefers a sibling, and this gets communicated to the children, right? One child gets all the best stuff. All the other kids get the hand-me-downs, right? Or it's, why can't you be like your sister? Why can't you be more like your brother? Think about Jacob and Esau, right? If you look at the story of Isaac, Rebekah, Jacob, and Esau, you know what that story really is a picture of? It's a picture of a dysfunctional home and all the problems that come. And you know, one of the issues there in their home was favoritism, right? Dad's favorite was Esau. Mom's favorite was Isaac, or Jacob rather. And here's all these problems. Right? Could you imagine from the child's point of view? You ever read that story and you're like, dude, this is a sick, twisted woman. And she's like, you know, yeah, you're going to deceive your dad, right? Because we need to make sure that you get the blessing. And she's teaching her son to go and deceive dad. Like, how insane. But there's people, they live with this stuff, right? Favoritism. You are the favorite, which communicates something bad to the favorite child and also communicates something bad to the unfavorite child. You know, the sibling rivalry or competition. They encourage that. There's parents, they really believe that, like, that's a good thing. It'll help you get ahead in life, you know. You compete, you're better, you win. And really what it's doing is it's communicating rejection. So all of these produce rejection, a sense or feeling of rejection. We could define rejection as a profound sense of being unwanted. The word rejection actually means to be cast aside, to be thrown away as having no value. This is what rejection does. It gives us the message: we have no value, we don't fit, we don't measure up, something's wrong with us. So many times it starts in the home. So let's open up there for questions or comments before we move on. Surely there are comments after that. Jeremy? We'll have grace on you. Do your best. Yeah, definitely. The point of this is not, it's not some effeminate, it's not like you're saying you can't be a man. Because, right, what we're talking about is not cutting everything hard out of life. And I'm not talking about just, some people, when we talk about this, they think, oh, that means I should just basically give my kids everything they want. No, because that's not loving either, right? Because that doesn't produce healthy things. What we're talking about is striving, right? If you're going to take it from the parental side, obviously the point of this is some people, you have unfortunately lived this in your home as a child. But as a parent, what you're trying to do is you're trying to instruct your kids and equip them for what they need later on in life. That means, what do they need later on in life? Well, extremely important, what I'm talking about right now, is they need a sense of acceptance in their family. They need to know that. They need to have that. We love you, we accept you, and they need to know it. It's not enough that I feel it towards them. I need them to know it. So there are actions that we take, but that's not all they need, right? They need other things. They need discipline. They need structure. They need life skills, right? And part of what you're talking about is, well, you still need life skills, right? You're not going to make it if every time your boss tells you, why aren't you here on time? And then you start crying and you, it's like, well, that's not going to work, right? If a grown man on a construction site starts crying when you cut that rope, you rejected me. Like, that doesn't work. But what you find is if you communicate love and acceptance, you're able to instruct a child in a healthy way, right? This is what a lot of parents don't understand. Those things actually go hand in hand. They work together. If you love and accept the child, you will be able to correct the child, right? A lot of times when you see a child that is uncorrectable, it is because many times the child hasn't been loved or accepted first. Now, of course, if you're talking about a kid that's just a spoiled brat, well, the issue is he needs a good spanking, right? And that will set him free. He'll stop thinking the world revolves around him, and he can't just do whatever he wants. And a child also needs that, but those things have to go together. So no, I'm not saying that you shouldn't teach your kids to be tough and courageous. And yeah, a lot of times love is, no, I'm not going to go down to the school and tell the teacher what I think about she got mad at my child. That's not love. That doesn't help a kid, right? No, you don't want to. You want to teach them how to handle real life. You want to teach them, my parents had a rule that I think was very good. And it was, if you get in trouble at school, I don't care if it's your fault or not, you're in trouble at home. Like, well, that's a good lesson to learn about life, because you know what it taught me? It taught me, like, well, you better figure out how to get out of trouble. Like, and that's a good lesson maybe on a job, right? You ever seen people that they get fired even though it wasn't their fault? Right? They're all upset. Yeah, but you lost your job. Now you have no money. Yeah, but it wasn't my fault. Well, you didn't figure it out. I don't know. That may be true or not true, but it's one of those things, right? It was like a tough love thing, but it helped me understand, So yeah, I do think there's a place for that, but you need both, right? You need both. Yeah. Who else? Stella? Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, parenting is a challenging thing all around. Um, yeah, but, communicating love and acceptance is such a valuable thing. Children need that. Children need that. All of, you know, your relationship with your child cannot be a constant criticism. My dad actually reminded me the other day, I don't remember if I heard him or if we were talking, but I remember him, he said something about how when I was backslidden, right? I wasn't even saved. I wasn't even doing right. That he said that he remembers my mom making a concerted effort to still spend time with me and do like things that I liked. And my wife was asking about it. I said, yeah, I remember, like, I wasn't even saved. I'm rebellious. I'm causing problems. And my parents weren't approving of that. They had, boundaries, discipline, all that. And yet I remember my mom also, you know, she would take me out for coffee. We'd go to the bookstore. She would do things that I liked because she was trying to communicate the message like, yeah, you're not doing right now, but it doesn't mean I don't love you. Like, and I will always still love you and accept you. Even if you don't do right, I'm still going to love you. And that was an important thing, for me to receive from her. So yeah, we do have to be careful as parents that our whole relationship with our children is not criticism. That's not healthy. Yeah, that's true. All right, so let's think then about the lies of rejection. The greatest danger of rejection is that it tells us lies. It tells us lies. The devil's greatest strategy is to get us to believe things that aren't true. How many know this is what he's all about? Think about Eve in the garden. Eve's life was changed when she believed lies. The devil came along, presented a lie to her. When she believed that lie, her life was changed. This is what the devil wants. He wants you to believe things that aren't true. And I need you to listen to me very careful right here. Everybody's locked in, right? Okay. It's very possible to believe something to be true with all your heart, and it may not be true. Right? Remember, there was a time when people believed that the world was flat. And they believed it with all their heart. Like, if we sail too far that way, we're going to fall off the edge. So don't sail that way. It wasn't true. You could sail as long as you want. You're just going to go around in circles around the globe. You're not going to fall off. But they believed it. And so it's very possible, this is what happens with rejected people. They believe it. You talk to them. You hate me. No, that's not true. But they say, of course it's true because I feel it. I feel it. And they feel it so strongly, they think it has to be true. This is exactly what the devil wants. He wants you to believe a lie. John 8, verse 44. Okay, so this is what the devil wants. He wants you to believe a lie. This is what he's all about. It's really his greatest power against people. He needs you to be deceived because then you will make very bad, unhealthy choices. How many know the only reason people end up in hell is deception? Right? If you stood them in front of it right now, if you stood them in front of hell, the way that it really is, right? Lake of fire, heaven. Which one do you think they're going to choose? If they were choosing, they could see it all. Every single person's choosing heaven. The only reason people end up in hell is deception. They believe a lie. So think about some of the lies of that rejection gets us to believe. It gets us to believe that you have no worth, right? You are worthless. It gets us to believe that it's your fault. There are people that live with this lie. It's your fault that your parent left, that your parents got divorced, that you were abused. It's you. If you were a better child, they wouldn't have done that. If you did more, etc. Right? There's people, they live with an overall feeling of guilt. I don't deserve good. I deserve bad things. And it's because they believed that lie, that it's their fault. Right? I've talked to people that have told me, I believe God wants to punish me. It's like, man, that's a horrible way to view God, and it's a shocking. It's like, my Bible says God wants to save you. What? No, because of what? And they live with this, like God is out to get me. Right? You ever met like a very harsh Christian? They always think God's ready to judge everybody. He's going to get you, and you see them, and God's going to judge you and kill them. And those evil Democrats, God's going to kill them all. It's like, what? I mean, what a way. You really think, like, you think that God is up in heaven giving some twisted pleasure to just throw people into hell? That's not who God is. But it's because they're living with this overall sense of guilt. They feel that things are their fault and that I deserve punishment. So it's easy to point the finger. Everybody else deserves punishment too. It gets us to believe that our worth is based on performance. Right? I only deserve love if I perform well or do right. It gets us to believe the lie that we need to be perfect. Ever met a perfectionist? That's because they think that I have to be perfect in order to be worth something. Somewhere along the way, someone communicated that to them. Only if I am perfect will people not reject me again. Or they believe the lie, everyone in life will reject me the way my parents did. This is one of the things that you see play out in people's lives. They are just waiting for people to reject them. It's not a matter of if, in their mind, it's a matter of when. At some point, you're going to abandon me. You know, I remember when I turned over my church in California that I pioneered, the night that I announced, right, here it is in my mind, my pastor called, there's a need. We need you in Espanola. Absolutely. You know, whatever my pastor needs. Destiny, right? God wants me to go there. It's the will of God. And God's going to do good things there, and he's going to do good things in my church that I pioneered in California. That's my perspective. The night I announced it in my church, I had a group of people walk out of church. After the service, they came and they told me, you're leaving us just like my mom did. Like, wow, that wasn't the way I saw it at all. But, right, here's what's going on in their mind. Mom left me, therefore, everybody's eventually going to leave me. And then something happens in life, and they reinterpret it to that narrative, right? Yeah, that's it. See, I knew you were going to abandon me. I knew you were going to reject me. This is the problem with rejection. All of life becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Listen, if you think everybody has treated you unfairly and everybody does you wrong, can I give you a little bit of wisdom? It's not true. It's not the whole world. It's how you're looking at the whole world. Everybody treats no. That can't mathematically be true. That's impossible. But the problem is, in your heart, there's this rejection that you filter all of life through. So the primary result of rejection is an inability to receive or communicate love. This happens in human relationships, right? People struggle with communication. They struggle telling people how much they love them, or it's like the feeling of like you shouldn't let people know what's going on in you because they might reject you if they knew. There's people, they won't open up to their spouse. They won't open up to their pastor because if I tell them how I feel, if I tell them what's going on, they're going to reject me. We can struggle with affection, receiving it, right? There's people, don't touch me. It can happen, in marriages, right? Sexually. They don't want that part of marriage because there's rejection issues, or they struggle giving affection. Even in the family, right? There's people, I don't want to give a gift because, or I don't want to receive a gift. I don't want to feel like I owe you anything, because that's their whole way of approaching life. And then, of course, even worse, it can happen in our relationship. We can transfer our feelings towards our parents, towards God. Now, the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is fear. Fear. And this is the problem, right? There are people who are saved, yet they live in constant fear in relationship with God. 1 John chapter 4, verse 18. Okay, so there's people. This is their relationship with God. It's constant fear. They're afraid that God can't be trusted, right? People who don't trust God, the reason is because they are afraid He's going to let them down. Right? I can't trust what God says. I can't believe Him because other mom and dad let me down. So how could I trust God? And they don't think that consciously, but that's what's happening under the surface. They're afraid they're never going to measure up in God's eyes. They think that maybe God's going to give up on them when they see, or when He sees what they're really like. Or they feel like they have to perform in order to deserve or earn God's love. The way I like to put it is, even in our fellowship, my phrase for it is, it's like, you could be like a fellowship Catholic. And it's this feeling of never measuring up. Like, it doesn't matter how much, I'm never going to approve of God's love. And they treat serving God like that, right? Well, if I just pray more, if I outreach more, then maybe God will be nice to me and He'll love me. But it's never enough, right? Because that's not what God's love is based on. And that's an unhealthy way to deal with God. You're not trying to work your way into God's good favor. Luke 15, verse 29 and 30. Squandered? Okay, so here's the older brother and the prodigal son story, and this is his view of the father, right? Is it's this like, I'll never measure up, only if I perform well, but that's not who God is. That's not who God is. So we're going to continue with this next week and get to the answer. But why don't we open up there just for any questions or comments? We just have a few minutes, but something you want to ask or add. We talked about rejection in the home and how powerful that is. Something you want to ask or add before we finish up this morning. It can be. It can be. Not always. Sometimes it's just an excuse. But yeah, it can be. Yep. Yeah, if they've been sent that message, right? That you're only loved if you have everything together. Well, then yeah, a lot of times they don't even, right? I've never lived in a place where I've heard people so much tell me things like, well, if I walk in the church, the building will fall down. You know, and really what they're describing is like, well, I have to be good enough to even come and think that God might help me. And it's totally antithetical to the gospel, right? The gospel is come as you are, and Jesus will change you if your heart is really surrendered. So yeah, definitely. Michelle? Yeah. Yeah. So much of it happens subconsciously. We don't even realize, because remember, what we're talking about is roots. And that's why we have to deliberately expose these things, right? I understand this Sunday school is very uncomfortable for some people. I get it. Trust me. And we don't do it to make people feel uncomfortable. It's because the only way you deal with the roots is you got to dig them up, right? And that can be uncomfortable, but it's how you find healing, because a lot of times these things are under the surface and people don't even realize. They don't even realize where all these problems have been coming from. And all right, very good, guys. We're going to have church at 10:30.